Welcome, everyone. Wow, I needed a second to collect myself after that. We feel honored to have had the chance to weave so many of our members' stories together and create this film. Now that we've all had the opportunity to watch it, we'll hear from two of the movie stars, Wendy Johnson and Seth Watkins. So I'll ask a few questions to start us off, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So, Wendy and Seth, my first question for both of you is, we just saw lots of examples of different ways farmers are thinking outside the box with raising livestock. How do you think that benefits our communities? How does it help us bring people back and make Iowa a nicer place to live? Wendy, I want to start with you.
Well, livestock can be pretty low input. You don't need a lot of infrastructure or land to start in. You can custom graze, you can graze on other people's land, but the livestock is what it helps build equity, right? And raising livestock and farming in general, I think, is this kind of spiritual experience. And I think those seeking kind of more meaningful work, there's just nothing better than working with animals and plants and growing food. So for yourself and for your community. And I think you said it well in the film, Megan. You know, livestock producers depend a lot on their local community, their hardware stores, their feed mills, their welding shops. And so those dollars spent are helping revitalize local communities as well. And people love food. Everyone loves to eat. And so sharing food at your table with other people in your community, friends, people that move into your community that are new, you know, friendships are built through food and sharing food.
Thanks, Wendy. Seth, can we get your take on how you think livestock benefit our communities and how they help us bring people back and make Iowa a nicer place to live?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing I was struck by when I watched the video is livestock does bring people back here. It was pretty cool seeing Wendy's husband, who's a California kid. I'm also a California kid whose parents decided almost 50 years ago to choose rural migration, you know, to buck the trend. I think the biggest thing I think about a lot, you know, we have a lot of well-intended policy trying to help us as farmers, but what if that policy actually said, we just want you to do what's very best for the land? So over the last 20 years, we wouldn't have torn up 1 million acres of highly erodible land, or we wouldn't have drained wetlands or things like that, and we would have kept livestock going. You know, I would speculate that that would be a much more stable supply and demand for our crops. We'd actually have seen better crops for our corn and soy. We'd see more innovation in livestock and more opportunities. So the beauty of doing that and what's best for this precious Iowa land we have is I do see the opportunities to bring people back, but it also gives us an opportunity to keep our ground in perennial cover, which is good for our soil, which is good for our water. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that for Iowa to grow, if we get our environment right, then I think our small towns can grow. And I think if our small towns can grow, that can sustain more small scale farmers. So it's a good thing.
Thanks, Seth. My second question for both of you is, it's clear we need more meat processing capacity for small and mid-sized farmers in our state. So what are your ideas on how we move forward? And as a follow-up to that, how has COVID-19 changed your thinking on all of this? And Seth, we'll start with you.
Yeah, first of all, I've learned a lot about meat processing this year because when there weren't locker places, I learned how to butcher my own calves, which is probably nothing I'd be a huge advocate for. But, you know, on a very small scale, I suppose there's opportunity to do that where the calf stays on your farm and you compost the rest. But taking one step back, first of all, I guess it's the thing on top of my mind, and thinking about how COVID has impacted things. I guess the very most important thing I think all of us have to do right now is be supportive of the people that work in the packing plants that our livestock are going to at the moment. We have to multitask, I guess is the new word, but we've got to make sure the people working there have good working conditions. We've got to make sure that they've got a decent job, good benefits, that they have an honest path to citizenship, that they're not being exploited. I mean, my entire livelihood has been sustained by some people that I hadn't kind of taken for granted, and I'm disappointed in myself for that. So square one, whether you're a fan of big packing plants or not, we've got to have the back of the workers. Number two, it has exposed that we need more options on where our livestock go to be harvested. And I think we have to think about what that scale is. You know, I hate the thought of any of my critters going to waste, so to speak. So it needs to be big enough to work. I'm told that like 40 head is an optimum number where you can start, where people can have a good job, where we can run the livestock through. And this is where I talked about policy and collaboration. When we think about economic development in Iowa, a few years ago, we put 110 or 120 million dollars in tax credits to build a fertilizer plant in Lee County, which is going to give us more nitrogen to wind up in our water and cause more problems. What if we would have sat down, or what if we spend that kind of money across our entire state on sustainable livestock systems, where you think about everything that goes into that, when you think about helping packing plants get started, small scale packing plants, collaborating with our grocers for more local supply, collaborating with food hubs. And you think about what it goes into building a livestock system, the fence, the cover crops, the integration of legumes, water systems, all these things come together, and it winds up with giving us more people in Iowa. And I really believe would create literally thousands of jobs for that kind of investment. And, you know, one of the areas I touched on briefly was saying, you know, can we sit down with our two main grocers in Iowa after going through this and say, what are your supply chain needs? Can you work with us? Because I think it's to their best interest as well to have vibrant rural communities. So maybe this is the opportunity to come down and you know, say, is this something we can meet the demand of or not? And can we build something that can also work for you, but also provide the farmers that need a place for custom kill and things like that, that want a direct market, give them that option too. So we've got a safe, efficient, and reliable supply, a reliable source, but also something that gives some options. And I've talked way too long.
Oh, Seth, everything you said was very important. So thank you. Wendy, I'm curious your thoughts on that question. How do we move forward to increase small to mid-scale meat processing capacity in our state?
Well, Seth, you really said it quite eloquently. I don't really have much more to add. You know, USDA, we just need more USDA and state inspected plants. And if that is supporting custom processing plants across the state, and as farmers maybe in that region or community, putting some private investment into those custom plants to get them to maybe increase capacity at some point. I think that's that would be a great way to get more animals to be able to process and stay in the state. I think COVID is just such this black swan event, what it has done is created awareness around how fragile our food system is, and I think more and more people are now concerned about where their food comes from, and feeling food secure is kind of top of mind for many folks, and knowing that like your supply at the grocery store is only have 3 days worth of food, you know, knowing a farmer who can supply that food, I think is really important. And the biggest question is the supply and demand, right? And I think that's the biggest puzzle piece that we have to figure out. buying ahead from farmers helps the farmer, helps them plan as well. And so, yeah, I don't want to talk too long. Seth really covered it quite a bit.
Thank you, Wendy. So I have one more question from both of you, and we'll be brief so we can get to our audience questions. And this is a fun one. What do you hope Iowa looks like in 10 years? Seth, go for it.
I want to see the opposite of what we have now. I want to see young, diverse, and verdant.
Concise. Thank you. Wendy?
That was really good, Seth. My first word is diverse. I want to see the landscape change and the people, more animals on the land, more food produced that people can eat, and soil covered, vibrant rural communities. Yeah, I want to see that.
Wonderful. So now we're starting on some questions from our audience. So I have a question for Seth from Tom Wind. Have you seen evidence of cleaner water coming off of your farm over time?
Yes, we have. We actually had the folks from Iowa State down. I think Jamie Bennett came down to a couple of places and helped me do nitrate testing and some of those areas. I think it's key to remember we can screw things up grazing also. So once you kind of get that sweet spot and understand how much to leave, how much grass to leave, you start seeing the benefits of trees, you start managing around your streams. It was really neat to me to see in the video today, in the movie today, how in some of the grazing project how they'd worked with the stream banks and then move the livestock away and rotate it through. But I can literally show you water on my side of the road coming off to a source point at 2 parts per million of nitrate, and water across the road coming off at 14, and it's attributed to permanent cover.
A question for Wendy from Tom Wind. When you came back to the farm, did you initially work with your father to farm with him? And if so, how did the working relationship develop over time? What did he think about you coming home?
He might be on the call right now, actually. We should ask him. Yeah, when I first moved back, I had no background in agronomy. I didn't go to school for agronomy. I went to school for something totally different. So yeah, when I came back, I learned from the best, and that was my dad. And so I think we worked pretty well together. I mean, we definitely have our disagreements. We negotiate a lot, compromise. Sometimes I feel like I'm compromising a little bit more, but we keep it all civil.
So I have a question for both of you to answer. It's from Aaron Reeser. So Seth mentioned in the movie something about farmers and bikers eating pizza together at the Royal Isle or Emerald Isle, I believe, in Imogene, Iowa, as examples of us, of breaking down the us versus them barrier. Aaron would love to hear from both of you on how we all do more of that, finding common ground, especially in these times of deep division. Seth?
Probably you paraphrase what Dick Thompson taught us when he founded PFI, and it's get along but don't, or yeah, get along but don't always go along. And it has been a little challenging the last few years, but I've always found like the last bastion of getting along is to a certain degree still conservation and how we care for our land. And sometimes I can start conversations off of that. And, there's other things. The biggest thing I've seen in communities, I really believe, and you see this across Iowa, and maybe you've heard me say this before, the small towns and communities in Iowa that actively reach out to and involve their farmers and their chambers of commerce and their economic development seem to me to be a lot more vibrant and sustainable than those that don't. And you do have both kinds in our town or in our state. So getting involved in those and showing the good things that can happen is a great start. You know, Imogene, Iowa is a pretty tiny town, but what they've accomplished in bringing people together through the Trace and through the Emerald Isle has broken down a lot of barriers and made us a much more cohesive community. We can at least talk about going to Imogene on Tuesday night and drinking beer and riding bikes. So we can start there.
Nice, Seth. Wendy, your thoughts on finding common ground?
Well, when I first moved back, an organization had just kind of started out of Tim Landgraf and Jan Libby called Healthy Harvest in North Iowa. And they really, that organization really brought about bringing people from urban areas and countrysides and understanding where their food comes from. And they hosted several educational events, and it's still an organization today, but also farm to table dinners in these towns that in the counties that they represent. That was one great way to just start having a conversation about food and what you're producing and who you are. Also, I think just listening to your neighbors and listening to what their practices are, maybe what their challenges are, or just getting to know them is a great way to build bridges. You know, creating relationships with people that might have different viewpoints and backgrounds as you, but just listening, I think, goes a long way.
Thank you. So for a more technical question, this is concerning rotational grazing. One of the biggest issues is water access in each paddock. What advice do you have to help people with that challenge? Seth, do you want to go first?
I kind of have to rely on gravity for a lot of things where we are because we have pretty significant lift and some of those issues that we face getting water to and from. It's a huge one. You know, it's a labor factor. It's an equipment factor. It gets more moving parts, and I'm getting to that point in my life that sometimes I don't have the ambition to see some of the things the younger people are doing. So my advice is make sure there's young, enthusiastic people around that are willing to keep figuring out better ways to do this. And then B goes back to exactly what I talked about. I think helping us improve our water systems even beyond what we're working with NRCS on right now is a valid economic development issue. You know, I'm devastated when I drive through Iowa and I see ponds being bulldozed out, when I see fences being bulldozed out, and we are making ourselves the very most efficient organization we can in exporting every nutrient we have to the Gulf of Mexico as fast as possible while exporting the people out of here. And if we're really serious about having a vibrant, strong state, figuring out ways to move the water in our pasture, going back to that simple fact, is going to be a part of it. It's expensive to lay water line. And it also shows that there's probably a lot better argument for smaller farms because the smaller farms are the ones that can probably do that the best. You know, they can pay more attention to this precious land and resource we have. I'm kind of ashamed of myself that I haven't figured out a better way to do it than a 5 to 7 day rotation.
Wendy, do you have a quick answer for your watering system?
Yeah, NRCS, they're a great partner, so Equip is definitely a helpful tool with that. Also, PFI members, I've learned so much about watering systems through PFI members, and I've actually implemented one from a member, and I'm looking at implementing another one from a member using a solar pump. So learn a lot from others.
So we only have 2 minutes left, and we have a big question. It's going to take up the rest of the time, but this question's from James Franson, and he asks, how do we bring the regenerative and sustainable agriculture discussion to the right platforms to make real change? So he alludes to, how do we engage conventional farmers, consumers who are not currently thinking about their food choices, politicians, educators, students, etc. Seth?
You know, you've got to show it can be done. And I've made this argument in the past. One of the best areas I know in the state of Iowa to show this is capable is our own land grant at Iowa State University. There's 14,000 acres of land. We certainly don't need to do all 14,000 in conventional agriculture. I think it's a great example of a place where we can start to lay these systems side by side and actually give the data, just the facts on how this works versus that. And you can incorporate so much with that, whether it's agritourism, whether it's other, permaculture, all those things. But, I think if you want to reach a bunch of Iowans and show them what we're capable of, can you imagine going to the Iowa State football game and having that be the first farm to field or farm to concessions system? And, we think nothing of giving a football coach royalties off merchandise sold for the team. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if the College of Ag and Life Sciences could have the concession business at Iowa State University and show what we can raise? So I think that's a big area to start and show what we're capable of. And that would be demonstrated on a pretty wide area. It's a start. But I think if we're not seeing that at scale from our university, it's really hard for a lot of my peers to buy in.
Thanks, Seth. Wendy, do you have a last thought on how we bring this to the right platforms?
Well, I think PFI is a great platform, and what you've been doing, we've been doing in field days, on-farm research, getting that out into media channels. I think all of that is quite important. And I also think by meeting in the middle, talking, listening to other folks, learning about what we have in common instead of what we have different is important. And I think the lastly is sharing with kids, bringing kids out to the farm. They're starting to lose that. Kids today, I think, are starting to lose even being able to be on a farm and having any experience, touching a chicken, picking up an egg, those types of things, feeding, grass to sheep or, some hay or whatever. People are losing touch with that. And I think just inviting people out to farms is a great way.
We have reached the end of our time. And so with that, I want to thank both of you for farming the way you farm and for sharing your insight and for giving us all so much inspiration and hope. And I want to thank all of you out there watching and engaging with us for being here tonight with us. And we hope to see you tomorrow at our day 2 of the conference. So good night.